welcome to this Maple Spirits Pulse video bite, where we do a quick dive into hot topics on Canadian religion, spirituality, and secularity. So my name's Sarah Wilkins-Laflamme. I'm director of the Institute for Religion, Culture, and Societal Futures, and I'm joined here today with my lovely colleague, Galen Watts.
Hello.
And we're on the beautiful University of Waterloo campus. And our hot topic for today is religious populism. So, hi Galen.
Hi Sarah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So Galen, I get a lot of questions about religious populism, especially since the Trump presidency. So what do you think of when you hear the words religious populism? How would you define the phenomenon?
Okay, so I'd start off by separating the two terms. Let's not get into the semantics of religion, but we have some sense of what we're talking about when we talk about religion. But what is populism? Populism, most scholars will say, is a kind of style of politics, maybe a sort of thin ideology, which pits a kind of supposedly corrupt elite against sort of, the pure and hardworking, ordinary people.
Right, so like the boots versus suits kind of thing.
That's
right?
exactly right.
Okay.
So, think kind of boots versus suits. That is sort of populism in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we're talking about religious populism, I actually think that it's useful to sort of distinguish between two different kinds.
Okay.
So on one hand, you might think about a kind of religiosity, which is in a sense sort of populist in style. So it's one that's sort of going to be attuned to and sensitive really to the sort of let's say sensibilities of quote unquote ordinary people. And you could think about sort of early Pentecostalism, maybe even going further back, sort of, early Methodism. These were really sort of, you could say, religious populisms in the sense that they were deeply religious movements, but which had a kind of populist sensibility, you might say.
Right.
So that's the first kind. The second one is really what we might think of as sort of a populism that just happens to sort of grab onto religious symbols, religious kind of sort of maybe identifiers. So here we're thinking of like, it's really fundamentally a populist style, but maybe, there's a kind of like talk a lot about Christian civilization, right? Okay. Or about kind of our way of life, and there's sort of certain kind of religious signifiers. Right. Within that values yeah. Exactly. And so here and I think this is really important, because it means that really it's important to distinguish between, well, when we're talking about religious populism, well, one of those, it could be one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's really interesting. So what do you think some of the key current dynamics are when it comes to religious populism? So what should folks take away, that they might not hear necessarily in the media or in the everyday life about this phenomenon?
Yeah, so thank you for the segue. I mean, my view about this is that when people are talking about religious populism today, more often than not, what we're talking about is actually the second kind. Okay. So I tend to think, and you and I have written about this, that we are living in an age of increased secularization, that actually religion is on the decline. And so when you see, talk about, rise in Christian nationalism, for instance, in the US and in Canada, or maybe, you notice that in parts of Europe, there's a lot of talk about kind of Christian civilization. There are questions, well, does this mean that we're seeing a renewed kind of revitalized religious traditionalism in the form of a kind of religious populism? And my view is that no, we're actually seeing something more like kind of authoritarian populisms that are quite secular, but in terms of their actual kind of underlying belief systems, but nevertheless, they are drawing from religious kind of symbols and religious sort of tropes as a way of kind of showing commitment to or aligning with certain kinds of conservative ideas. And so there's a sort of association of Christianity with a certain kind of way of life, a certain kind of maybe even ethnicity. And I think that often what you're seeing, and I would say this is certainly true in the US with the rise of Trump and MAGA, right? You're seeing this kind of move towards talking about Christianity and other kind of religious symbols, but there isn't actually a lot of religious substance there. It is a much more populist, even authoritarian kind of movement that happens to sort of draw from religious symbols and words in order to advance a particular political agenda.
Oh, wow. Okay, really helpful and interesting. Thanks so much, Galen. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. And Galen and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.